Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience. We had just a couple of, well, no, not a couple. We had one technical difficulty, and we're resolving that right now. But wait, maybe I'm not supposed to say that with a program associated to Georgia Institute of Technology. But I'm just kidding. But greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us as we kick off the 19th season of Poetry at Tech. I'm Travis Denton, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Director of the program. I've been doing this for quite a while, I have to say, a number of years, but I'm always excited right about this time of the year as the nights get a little bit cooler here in Atlanta. The awfully hot Atlanta summer is winding down. Class is back in session at Georgia Tech, and Ilya and I get to share the best poets around with you. Tonight, we come together for poetry, and I want you to remember this. We come together for poetry, and that's one of the many things that unite us. It allows us to come together and celebrate in our shared humanness, and that's a phrase that I believe in, a phrase I like to use as often as I can, our shared humanness. Normally, we gather en masse in the Crest Auditorium, but being able to meet like this isn't a substitute. It's actually a gift. Tonight we have folks with us from all over the country, and right now it looks like 317 of you guys, many of whom are from all over the country, and a lot of you wouldn't be able to attend otherwise. And we're happy that extends our outreach. I bet many of you, I picture you, for better or for worse, kicked back on your porches, on your patios, in your lounge chairs, perhaps with a coffee, a tea, or your favorite beverage, in your slippers and pajamas. If you're not in your slippers or pajamas, I can't imagine why you would. I also hear that tonight we have quite a number of folks for whom this is your very first poetry reading. Very first. And for you folks, let me know if you're not hooked after this one, because we need to have your ears checked and maybe even have your pulse checked. We'll see about that. But as I mentioned, we've been doing this for a while. Poetry at Tech was created some 19 years ago when two Georgia Tech alums, unbeknownst to one another, but believing that a world-class university such as Georgia Tech should have a world-class poetry program, they gave gifts that established Poetry at Tech. Those generous spirits were Henry C. Bourne, an electrical engineer and interim president of Georgia Tech for a while, and Bruce McEver. We continue to thank the Bourne family and Bruce for those sustaining gifts. And let's go ahead and say it. Cheers to the next 19 years of Poetry at Tech. Ilya and I plan it every day. And I want you to know those gifts do more than keep the lights on. Since Poetry at Tech began, we brought nearly 300 poets to Georgia Tech. We have a community outreach program. We provide free community workshops in the spring of every year, provide classes to Georgia Tech students, and the list goes on and on. The program continues to grow its outreach on campus in Atlanta, Georgia, the Southeast. Tonight is a double headliner event with Ross Gay and Danez Smith, two poets I've been thrilled about having for a long time here at Poetry at Tech. They were going to read in alphabetical order, but we're working on getting Ross in. We're going to get started with Danez here in just a couple of minutes, and Ilya is going to introduce Danez. But to get some of the technical stuff out of the way, we're not going to be having a Q&A following the reading, but I hope you'll leave a nice comment, maybe ask a question, something like that in the chat for the poets so they can know you're out there. I know that you guys have already been talking as we've been getting started. Oh, man, Danez, that was amazing.
Thank you.
I felt like I was floating most of the time. My goodness. Now, I don't know if my intro is going to make anybody cry. How can I follow that? Ilya, my goodness. But I'm going to do my best. I've always been a big admirer of Ross's work. But let's see what I can do. Okay, next up, Ross Gay. Thank you for being here, Ross. Next up is Ross Gay, otherwise known as Bizquit, Biz, Raheem. beef, beefy, big man, bigs, biggie, big little big, big papa, the big gay, Holmes, baby boy, baby day, the baby booger, beast, Sammy, saucy sauce, sauce. I'm not done. Let me take a breath. Dr. Sauce, Dr. Hot Sauce, Doc, the doctor, tall lady, tall drink, wave, arroz con pollo, Ross, the boss, the king of applesauce, Roski, Snothers, Six, Stace, Unky, Daddy, and several others too lewd or private to share. And I'm real, according to Ross. If you don't believe me, check out Essay 12 called Nicknames in his collection, Book of Delights. Book of Delights. I first met Ross back in 2007, not long after his first book, Against Which, came out. And I just come on board Poetry Attack, and Thomas Lux had invited us to read together, and I was a little trepidatious then, as I am now, but I was immediately struck by Ross's presence. This tall guy with a great big smile. He was handing out smiles around the room. Exuded a generosity of spirit, reading poems that were filled with a fascinating combination of wit, humor, and joy, along with many equally heartbreaking. And some poems with all of those qualities all at once. And that's a lot for a poet to juggle. The really great ones get that right. And I've been a fan ever since. And I'm thrilled he's back at Poetry Attack and not looking a day older. And neither am I, obviously. But Ross is going on to publish 7 collections of poems and essays. He won the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award, along with the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, and more. Too much to name. He's been awarded fellowships from Cave Canem, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and not to mention the Guggenheim Foundation. Ross's latest book, out just last month, is a book-length collection. It's a book-length poem, rather. It's called Beholding. It's a book that's filled with stunning music and light. And let me just share with you a few lines. And wow. And there is something about her gaze through the camera that reminds me in my body is a tree slouched in prayer. But its burden of butterflies reminds me I am one of the butterflies, that inside me always is a lifting off in the direction of something else. For you, I really mean to say waiting to happen, which is among the ways of saying this looking makes me breathe. This looking holds my breathing. It does not capture or shoot anyone, does not fix anyone, does not catalog or corral or specimen or coerce, but holds them both in their flight, moving as they are, moved as they are. I think Gabriel Calvacaresi says it best in their description of the book. They write, in this terrible era, Ross Gay has written a book that breathes this broken world in and then returns it to us so we might breathe too and break. And bloom whatever it is we are on the path to becoming. I know you're going to see this, all this and more in Ross's work tonight. So let's welcome Ross Gay once again to Poetry Attack.
Hey, am I on the thing?
It looks like it.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you, Travis. That's so good. Yeah, Danez and Ilya, it's good to see you all. And yeah, I'm glad to be with you. We had some tech, I had some tech issues, but that's what I do. I just have tech issues. Not Georgia tech issues, just tech issues. I'm going to read, funny that the poem that you, or the last thing that you were referencing is this photograph that I'm talking about at the end of this poem, Beholding. But I'm going to, and it's 2 people running toward a looking. And this is another poem actually about me looking at 2 people. That's it. Yeah. Carrie Mae Williams photo. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So I'm going to read, and I'm going to read this this poem called Two Bikers Embrace on Broad Street. It's in Philadelphia, but it could be a broad street near you. Two bikers embrace on Broad Street. Maybe since you're something like me, you too would have nearly driven into oncoming traffic for gawking at the clutch between the two men on Broad Street in front of the hospital, which would not stop, each man's face so deeply buried in the other's neck, these men not my guests to be fucked with. Squeezing through that first porous layer of the body into the heat beneath. Maybe you too would have nearly driven over 3 pedestrians as your head swiveled to lock on their lock. Their burly fingers squeezing the air from the angels on the backs of their denim jackets, which reminds you the 1,000,001 secrets exchanged in nearly the last class between your father and his brother, during which the hospital's chatter and rattle somehow fell silent in deference to the untranslatable song between them. And just as that clasp endured through what felt like the gradual lengthening of shadows and the emergence of once cocooned things and continues to this day, so too did I float unaware of the 3,000-pound machine in my hands, drifting through a stoplight while I gawked at their ceaseless cleave going deeper and deeper still, so that Broad Street from Fairmount to the Parkway reeked of the honey-scented wind pushed from the hummingbirds now hovering above these two men, sweetening somehow the air until nectar, yes, nectar gathered at the corners of my mouth like sun-colored spittle, the steel vehicle now a lost memory as I joined the fire-breasted birds in listening to air exchanged between these two men who are themselves listening forever to the muscled contours of the other's neck. All of us still and listening as if we had nothing to blow up, as if we had nothing to kill. This is called Poem to My Child, If Ever You Shall Be. And it's after the poet Steve Scafidi. Really dear friend, an amazing poet. Poem to my child, if ever you shall be. The way the universe sat waiting to become, quietly in the nether of space and time, you too remain some cellular snuggle dangling between my legs, curled in the warm swim of my mostly quietest self. If you come to be, then who knows? I wonder, little bubble of unbudded capillaries, little one ever a swirl in my vascular galaxies, what would you think of this world that turns itself steadily into an oblivion that hurts bad? Would you curse me, my careless caressing you into this world, or would you rise up and mustering all your strength into that tiny throat that one day no doubt would grow big and strong, scream and scream and scream until you break the back of one injustice, or at least get on your knees to kiss back to life some roadkill? I have so many questions for you. For you are closer to me than anyone has ever been, tumbling as you are this very second through my heart's every chamber, your teeny mouth singing along with the half-broke workhorse's steady boom and gasp. And since we're talking today, I should tell you, though I know you sneak a peek sometimes through your father's eyes, it's a glorious day. And there are millions of leaves collecting against the curves. And they're the most delicate shade of gold we've ever seen and must favor the transparent wings of the angels you're swimming with, little angel. And as to your mother, well, I don't know. But my guess is that lilac bursts from her throat, and she is both honeybee and wasp and some kind of moan to boot, and probably she dances in the morning. But who knows? You'll swim beneath that bridge if it comes. For now, let me tell you about the bush called honeysuckle, that the sad call a weed, and how you could push your little sun-licked face into the throngs and breathe and breathe. Sweetness would be your name, and you would wonder why 4 of your teeth are so sharp, and the tiny mountain range of your knuckles so hard. And you would throw back your head and open your mouth at the cows lowing their human songs in the field, and the pigs swimming in shit and clover, and everything on this earth. Little dreamer of the new world. Holy. Every raindrop and stand grain and blade of grass worthy of love and love and love. Tiny shaman, tiny blood thrust, tiny trillion cells trilling and trilling. Little dreamer, little hard hat, little heartbeat, little best of me. Dreamer of the new world. This is called The Opening. And this is a little bit of a longish poem, but you know, I'll read this, and maybe there'll be time to read one essay. Essayette, a short essay, called The Opening. And you know, I don't know if, like so many of my poems, this poem is in conversation, direct conversation, and like a kind of argument with Patrick Rosal, a poem of his called Boulevard. It's at least in conversation with that poem. And probably many others too. The Opening. You might rightly wonder what I'm doing here in the passenger seat of this teal Mitsubishi, with the hood secured by 6 or 7 thick strips of duct tape, sitting next to myself, who sits in the driver's seat, having quickly pulled into the lot of the Kentucky Fried Chicken on Route 413 in Levittown, Pennsylvania, from which, years ago, my father would sometimes bring home a bucket of hot wings to share just with me, his comrade in spice and grease and gore, rattling the little charnel house like a bell to indicate a joy impending, and plucking the wig to waft the scent toward the vents into my room, where I'd catch a whiff and toss my Avengers comic to vault down the steps before high-fiving my smiling old man, thinking of his own hours working at the Roy Rogers down on Cotman, and plunge into the scuzzy muck, the two of us silently cleaning the bones while the laugh track of some rerun ebbed and flowed. You wonder rightly what it is I am saying quietly in the ear of myself, and what I am pointing at with one hand while the other rests gently on myself's shoulder, tenderly, if not a bit tentatively. For myself is still a very big man, and quick, and trying hard not to take anyone with him over the ledge on which he stands, which you can tell when he just barely looks in my direction, a bit animal with sweat glistening the back of his neck and his temples, his jaw flexed with his hands clutching the wheel, the slightest whistle in his breath, while beneath the looming sign of the colonel, smiling like one concealing some awful and bloody secret, a family in the rear view parks their minivan and, not mostly noticing us, makes their way out. An older brother gripping the wrist of a smaller one who clutches his purple and yellow jacket. An infant snugged in its father's arms, tipping its head back to see us from beneath the light blue cap, opening and closing their hand as the glass doors swing shut behind them. You likewise might wonder how myself has arrived at this flamboyant terror, an accretion the way in caves where nothing without light is seen. Minerals will gather into impossible spires waiting to impale a thing. That, while driving home from his dear mother's apartment, he actually saw in his mind with a clarity like the semis behind him trudging toward the on-ramp to Philadelphia or New Jersey, like the carts wandering about the path-marked lot, or the woman in a house dress and slippers waiting at the crosswalk smoking a cigarette. His own hands working a vial of some sort, from which he poured a poison into his mother's half-eaten tub of blueberry yogurt, which imagined matricide is perhaps especially jarring to myself, given the awkward walking he does avoiding ants and other tiny beasts, given the long prayer he found himself giving the chickadee that met its death against his windshield, lodging under the wiper blades and drumming the glass with the one free wing until he could pull over, whereupon myself did kiss the unlucky thing, folding its wings into its body before laying it in a small hole at the foot of a dogwood tree in full regalia, its thousand flowers like a congregation walking arm in the river. And knowing myself well now, I can see what murderous birds flew numerous and hungry into the attic, shrikes especially, working their ways in at the slimmest shims of light between shingles and through rot holes, wedging first their heads in without blinking and collapsing the bones of their bodies, their tongues thrust out and necks made long, wriggling and leaving behind clumps of shivering feathers, blood glued to the cracks one after the next, prying through loose boards, snapping at the tail feathers of the ones in front of them, the clawing feet skidding in one after the next until the attic roared with soaring and the war screams of birds clutching one another with talons by the neck or back and veering quick toward any piercing barb or thorn or snapped branch, jeering into the air like this or impaled thing, writhing and fluttering once or twice, its wings twisting open its beak from which came no sound, which is in fact the wrong metaphor the more I think of it. For the birds in question favor the long view of open meadow. They love exposed perches on which they fasten their talons and unwrap their beautiful wings in the wind. And the birds I'm talking about are not birds at all, but common sorrow made murderous simply by nailing the shingles tight and caulking with the tar always boiling out back all possible cracks. Which is to say, the metaphor here has become the sealing up as much as any bird, has become the way myself has made unwittingly a habit of slathering mortar everywhere, almost by accident, for fear of what might forever slip in and be felt, which was, in addition to everything else, simply, God damn. How sad my mother was when my father died. God damn. How sad was myself. And how scared was myself. Scared nearly, in fact, to death at his mother afraid or not sleeping well or not unpacking for months in her new apartment, outside of which myself, visiting, would sit in his car for a half hour or more, staring into the yellow aluminum siding's patina and the seam it made with the fake white brick as he felt the bones of his chest breaking, which was the feeling of the very real terror he had at what his hands might do, which his hands would never do, which was like the wood shake helpless against the prying shrike, clawing and snapping its hunter's beak, which, I am happy to remind us both again, was not the feeling at all. All myself was feeling, in fact, was not feeling his heart break again and again. The way he did for some time sitting with his mother in her living room, watching the Eagles that year have a good season while she sobbed and didn't sleep well and in some way shone in her sorrow complete, though it was very hard for him to admire for the roaring in his head, which was nothing more, turns out, than the sounds of not weeping, the sounds of sadness turned back. Nothing savage, nothing cruel or vicious, not a bird in sight, just sadness. Which is to say, in other words, just being alive. My beloved chicken shit, my sweet little chicken shit, don't run, my baby, don't flee, my honey, hunker down, hunker down. There is in my yard a huge and beautiful peach tree. I planted the thing as a 3-foot whip a spindly prayer with a tangle of roots so delicate, so wild, I took 10 minutes to feather them apart before spreading them in the hole like a lightning storm in one of those images of the brain. Now the tree reaches almost into the grumpy neighbor Outback's yard, the one who once snarled at me and my house, "Why would anyone paint a house that color?" and whose unsmiling middle-aged daughter mows the lawn twice a day. Though I've seen in March or April, when the tree's myriad pink mouths unfurl and blow kisses to everyone in sight, the burdened curl of the old lady's back uncoil. I've seen her stand up some and wink at that tree, and no kidding, I saw her once teeter out in a gloomy gray pantsuit and, scrubbed by the bloom, change her costume right there and then to something frilled and blazing, which she wore on her trot through the neighborhood, whistling to the birds swirling behind her. In this neck of the woods, you have to prune a peach tree if you don't want the fruit to rot, if you don't want all that fragrant grandstanding to be for naught. Which is why today, this sunny April afternoon with no rain or real freeze forecasted, I dig out my tools and sharpening stone, making the blades all shimmer enough to skim the hair from my arm. Then, after cleaning each with a rag dipped in some watered-down bleach, I move around the tree's sprawling limbs, the ruddy young growth all wagging at the sun, all shivering with the breezes muscling through. And with my loppers and snips, I look up into the behemoth tree and begin clipping. First the wisps of growth and pencil-thick sprouts, rubbing off with my thumb tiny leaf buds peeking from the trunk, before hauling myself into the tree, wedging my boot into the sturdy crotch and clinging to a fat branch to keep thinning. Overlapping limbs, or those with some hint of disease, those grown haywire or deranged, twisting toward the light, and those from which last year grew maybe half a bushel of fruit, limbs wrist thick with bark whorled and cleft by age, but whose tight angle might snap this year and wreck the tree, and require a saw to remove, which I do, watching the last branch tumble into the pile of clippings below. I do this again and again, crawling through the branches as though through a beloved's ribs. Friends, if you haven't guessed, every time I do this a little bit, I mourn, leaning the pruner's steel flush against the flesh, or working back and forth the saw's grin and feeling the smooth wood tumble or twirl into the little tomb, which, after the cutting is done, is about my size. It's about the size, give or take, of everyone I've ever loved. This is how every spring I promise the fruit will swell with sugar by bringing in the air and light until, like the old timers say, the tree is open enough for a bird to fly through, which in fact they do. Two cardinals flirting, a blue jay flashing its pompadour, one of those little grayish birds I can't remember the name of, landing on the furthest limbs where it does nothing special besides maybe dump its teeny chamber pot while whistling this very ditty. Half dirge, half disco, some giggly trill loop-de-looping from its tiny beak while its ruffled, musty body sways on the tree's furthest finger, resting exactly where I put it, sitting just as I asked it to, which, from up here, where the newly opened view is good, I can see is what I was pointing to, what I was saying quietly to myself in the parking lot of the KFC in Levittown, Pennsylvania, as myself shivered and looked up, trying to see, trying to hear. I think I'm going to stop there because I think I did about 20 or 25 minutes and I don't want to overdo it. So I'm going to stop.
You're so good.
Thank you. So are you.
No. Man.
Yeah, that was so good. Thank you, Ross. I could listen to you guys all night long. There is no clock when you guys are reading. I can promise you that. I know that I echo the sentiments of so many people sitting out there and listening. So just thank you both. Such a joy for you to be here tonight and kick off this 2020-21 season of Poetry at Tech. And just a couple of quick notes before we go. Here's what's coming up. October 29th, join us for the Atlanta Poetry Festival and Translation Summit. And that's with Jericho Brown, Linda Gregerson, Brenda Shaughnessy, Sandra Meek, Ilya Kaminsky, Mario Chard, and a group of our special guest poets from Germany. And a quick note for everybody. We normally start about 7 o'clock. We're going to be starting that event at 3 o'clock because of the time difference with our German poets and such. So more on that to come. And let's close out the evening with gratitude. Great way to close the evening. Ilya and I would like to thank our crew, our squad, Team Poetry at Tech. That's Ganda Prasad and Bianca Bordianu. Thanks for so much. Well, we can't even name it all here, but thank you guys. Steve Hodges, the Director of Information Technology at Alvin Allen College. Joe Zima, Grant Lee Bailey, for all your expertise in bringing this thing online. And Carol Pulliam, everyone at Georgia Tech Cable Network. And, of course, huge thanks to our chair of the LMC, Richard Utz, for his incredible support of poetry and the arts at Georgia Tech and for Poetry at Tech. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for being here tonight. Been a joy. Thank you all. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Danez.